everyone, and welcome back to Great Owl Entertainment and the third episode of the Great Owl podcast. And finally, after so long, we're finally discussing Game of Thrones. I am joined by my best friend here, Harry.
Hello.
And, well, as I've already said, Thrones, it's so close to the final season. We've just had the trailer drop like last week. Well, technically, we're recording this on the first week of March, so yeah, it came out around this week.
Yeah.
But hey, to the point, actually, it came out, we got hyped, and now we want to talk about it. So
We've got 2 months to wait.
no, I think we've got 5 weeks. It's actually quite close. I kind of thought, is it going to be May for a second? But I think it was April 14th.
Oh yeah, and it's now April. Yeah.
Yeah, but
So,
yeah, it's here.
1 month. Yeah.
Oh. Okay, so
Exciting.
yeah, a lot to talk about, but for now, I want to take a slow burn for this. So we'll actually go through a few sections today. So we'll just start off the conversation in the podcast full front by saying how you were introduced to the series, the show, or the books, so and so. So for you, Harry, what was your introduction to Thrones? How did you get introduced to it?
So I listen to lots of podcasts about random stuff anyway, and they years ago, I think during season 3 or after season 3 came out, season 4 was about to come out. I heard loads of people talking about it and how it was so good and everything. But I never sort of paid attention to any of it. I was sort of like, oh, that's the thing that people watch. I'm probably never going to watch it because, it's time and effort. So I heard lots of people talking about it and it was great, but I never intended to get into it. And me and my mum got series 1 for someone as a present. We bought them season 1 on DVD as a present, but they already had it, so we just kept it, and I just put it in the cupboard. Didn't think anything of it. And when I was ill one day from school, this was ages ago, by the way, because I'm now working, and I was when I was in first couple of years of high school, so it was ages ago. I was ill, and I was in bed for a week, and I was like, what am I going to do? Just being ill, I can't just do nothing. I was like, I'll watch something that I haven't seen before. So I got season 1 to go through. I was like, I'll give this a try. People say this is good. And I saw season 1, and I was instantly hooked because it was so. I just loved season 1. So that's how I started Game of Thrones. I was ill in bed, and I watched season 1 because I had it. So yeah. So that's how I was introduced. What about you?
Okay, well, in some way, you were actually the one. I can remember early on you pestered me for a bit, so you need to check out this show, and I never bothered at the time because I've always been a Doctor Who fanatic, and I was always into Doctor Who at the time. I can't remember if this was around 2014 or 13. I can remember it being around the time you had season 3 on DVD, because I remember the pale case with the 3 dragons and the swords on there. I can remember you showing me the DVD cover and saying you should watch it. It's got dragons. And I just remember thinking, I'll get to it one day, but I'm focused on Doctor Who at the moment. So, yeah, I remember that being one of the early ones. But my earliest memory of actually seeing it by myself was actually when I was in New York it was actually around April of 2014, because it was before I got our family dog. And I can remember I was in New York with my family, and we saw several bus ads going by, and one of them included a poster for Series 4 of the show. And it had, the Raven and the Crow, All Men Must Die. And I can remember thinking, what's that from? And I can remember the GOT logo on it. So eventually, when I got back to that a few months later, I saw they advertised on something else. And I thought, I think I should check this out. And I checked out the series, and it was what you were talking about. And I stupidly got spoiled on a certain wedding. So I thought, oh wow, that looks graphic. And eventually I told my friends about it, and they said, here, you should check this out, because I've got them on my hard drive. You can watch them for free if you want. And so my friend gave me the first 5 seasons, because at the time it was August 2015, so season 5 had already aired, and it was all during the waiting period for season 6. So I was given the entire series up to that point, and it was one weekend where I had nothing to do. There wasn't anything doing. Nothing was going on, so I thought, you know what, I'll sit down and watch the first episode. I binged all 5 seasons in 2 days. I did not stop.
Is that possible?
Yeah, I did. I watched it well into the night. I maybe got a few hours of sleep, but then after that, I just started up right again. It was so good.
Surely you can't have seen all 5 of them, because there's 10 episodes per series in an hour each. So that's 50 hours.
Well, it must have been.
So surely it must have taken you 3 days.
close to that, I guess. I can remember it being around a weekend, and I can remember finishing it by the end of the beginning of that week. I'm sure of it. But yeah, I finished it that quick. I remember I never stopped watching it, except for my sleep breaks, I guess. But it was such a great series. But I guess my one regret was that I did find out about the Red Wedding. And
I had the same thing, because I said I watched the podcast. They will talk about like the Red Wedding. I was like, oh, great. I don't know what this means. And then I watched it. I was like, oh, this is what they mean. And then so I was like, it sort of dawned on me when I got to season 3.
Yeah. But yeah, after that, I was pretty much just up to the point where the books were, and I did try reading the first book in the series to try and see how I could get into it, because I was aware that the show and the books were drastically different as they went on. And I also had a friend at the time who was a co-worker when I was volunteering at a zoo, and I can remember he was an encyclopedia for the book series. He knew everything, and I remember him telling me a great story about how he thought of these great comparisons. Well, he didn't think of it, but he was aware of the concept of these great comparisons between A Song of Ice and Fire and The World of Cthulhu from H.P. Lovecraft, and how it ties into Euron Greyjoy's storyline. Again, I can't know it off by heart because it's so big, and I'd have to ask him to actually be on a podcast to explain it. But he was great, and it kind of reinvigorated my interest in the world, because it was at the point where the show wasn't airing. We were all waiting for season 6, and we didn't really know what was going to happen because it was surpassing the book. So was it going to stop for a while? Was it going to come back and spoil the ending? All that thing. But yeah, that's in a nutshell, I guess. That's how I was introduced to the show.
Nice.
Interesting stories to tell, I guess. But yeah. So now we finally got to the end. Well, close to the end. We've surpassed that. We've got to season 7. And now we're waiting for season 8. So, leading up to season 8, who would you say are your favourite characters from the show thus far?
So, from the beginning, I was sort of always into House Stark, because I guess all the sort of media I've seen before Game of Thrones sort of made me like the main sort of the bearded characters who have wicked armour and swords, I guess. So the Stark with the house that I sort of resonated with, I guess. And so Ned Stark, series 1, my favourite. Then in series 2 and 3, Robb Stark was my all-time favourite, and still is my all-time favourite character ever, even though Red Wedding. Oh yeah, spoilers basically for everything Game of Thrones, because we're going to be spoiling lots of stuff, just as a warning.
Of course.
So yeah, so when Robb Stark died, I was very, very sad, because he was my favourite character, and I was like, oh no, I have to choose another favourite character now. So now Jon Snow is my favourite character, because he's the sort of Stark character who's still going, luckily enough. So Stark's my big one, but I also have a couple of like other little characters here and there who are sort of minor players in Game of Thrones, but are still brilliant characters. Like Jorah Mormont, I really like him. He's sort of a flawed hero as such. The Hound, I think, is hilarious. The Hound reminds me of my friend, and that's why I think I like him, because he just sort of doesn't speak much. He's massive, and he sort of grunts and swears a lot. So yeah, those characters.
I can see how you guys get along.
Yeah. So yeah, and I think Bronn as well. I love Bronn.
Oh yeah, Bronn. I'll say this: one of the greatest things about this show is not just because it's a fantasy drama or because it's got dragons or monsters, White Walkers, undead, and tits, of course. But
I was waiting for you to say that.
It's always great to have characters that you can be so invested in after just one episode, let alone 7 seasons running. And I think that's the biggest strength in it, which is why I think season 7 did lack in some points. But we'll get to that. But I think my favourite characters, it's up top 3 really, because it's hard, because you like every character in some way. There are some characters that will do things that you think they should have done differently, or there were some you love to hate. But for me, I think the top 3 that I instantly fell in love with when I started the show was, of course, Jon, Arya, and Dany. Jon, I think, because, let's face it, he is the basic hero protagonist of the series, and he also has kind of like the expected background of a fantasy character. He's a bastard. He's treated differently because of his heritage, but he still has. He's not constantly hopeful, but he's down to earth. He doesn't try to make things so difficult for everyone. He tries to be a good man, and he tries to just do what's best for him, where he thinks he should go in life. And again, we can all relate to that, and also because he's a badass. But yeah, I think
and he cries a lot.
Does
In
he?
the first couple of series, yeah, in the first couple of series, he was crying, which was quite mopey.
He's a moper, but he's got the stark grin, really. But yeah, he's just the basic hero protagonist that we all latched onto after the first episode, really. And even though you have other characters full front and center as the early seasons go on, it's clear that his story is tied to the White Walkers, and you expect that in some form he's going to be there for the long run. So it was a shock when Mother's Mercy came along and then he got killed. So even though, for me, someone who hadn't read the books at the time, I thought, shit, how are they going to continue this? But in mindset, you think, yeah, there are other characters that they've spent so much time fleshing out. So if it had gone a certain way, I could have seen them going that direction. I think one of the greatest things also about the show is that it really does make you think about certain characters and their actions. Because a bit of insight, I'm actually rewatching the show with my friend Lennon. He actually got introduced to the show around late February. I've been pestering him to watch the show, like you did to me, for years now. But he's always said, I don't want to because it's a big show. I've got other commitments, and I don't want to just, sit down and just start watching it all together because I won't stop, and I want to have a life. I finally convinced him to watch it, at least the first season with me. We did not stop. We've been catching up with it every weekend since. And we just finished season 4 last night. So we're now going to start season 5 in a few weeks, and hopefully we can catch up to the final before we get to
How does season 4 end?
It ends with the Hound, getting beaten by Brienne. Jon fought the Battle of Castle Black.
Oh,
Jon fought the Battle of Castle Black, and Arya's sailing to Braavos.
Yeah.
Yeah, overall good season, and I think that's also the season.
Series.
Yeah, it's the season that kind of embraced the fantasy side to it. Because the first 3 seasons were very political and not based in real world, but they definitely treated the world as part of a real
it is
world.
Very based on sort of English history. Like Robert Baratheon, he was based off of Henry VIII.
Really?
Yeah, and because George R. R. Martin's very sort of a history student, so lots of the Game of Thrones stories are based in fact, apart from like the dragons and stuff. But yeah, lots of the sort of political, mostly the first couple series, it's very based off of like the War of the Roses and stuff like that.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, well, of course I know. I know about the Red Wedding is based on like the Black Dinner and another event where a king was massacred by a family member or something. But yeah, sorry. And just so people know, just in case, I'm sorry, but it's raining today, and so if you hear any background noise, apologies.
Is it raining where you are? 'Cause it's not raining where I am.
Yeah, it's windy, and I can hear rain pattering on the wall. So yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's windy today. Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry. Back to characters.
Yes.
We do love to ramble. But yeah, Jon's my favourite character. But I also love Arya because she's just, again, there's no way of saying it, she's a badass. But she also has a very interesting character journey because she clearly starts off as a young girl who has ambitions, but she's also against the norms. Again, we've all had that side to us when we're younger, and we feel like we want to break away from what people expect of us. And the fact that she goes through so much and has suffered so much, again, it just makes her more likable because we want her to get out of the situation and take command, become more better, all that jazz. And
like a very Arya bit of the series that I think is the best Arya moment is when the Hound is trying to take her to her Aunt Lysa, and they get there just as she died, and he's like, "Oh, Aunt Lysa's dead," and she just starts laughing. I think that's the best Arya bit because it's like she's been through so much crap up to that point. What else can happen? And she just bursts into laughter.
Yeah, it's a nice little injury, I guess, as well. Because you're getting this far, things still continue to go wrong.
Yeah.
And the other thing I love is that there's so many minor crossovers before they even actually meet. Like the fact that, again, as we said, Arya reaches the Eyrie and she hears about her aunt's death just as Sansa's at the Eyrie. Or in season 4, the same season, Bran is literally meters away from Jon at Crassus Keep, but you can't meet him because you have to have your own path. You have to be on your own path.
Yeah, it's like ironic, and like for the audience, it's just so frustrating.
Yeah. But yeah, and the last character that I have, because again, you can love every character, but my top three of John is John, Arya, and of course the Mother of Dragons herself, Dany. And I think she kind of has a similar thing with Arya going, where she has such an interesting journey, but it's also kind of like John. It's stereotypical of the fantasy character, where she's the one who has a tragic background, but she learns to get over it, and she gets all these fantasy elements to her. She gets dragons. She's immune to fire, even though it's not in the books, but yeah, it's cool in the show. And she learns to become a liberator for Slaver's Bay and all this other stuff in her conquest to retake the Iron Throne and her family legacy. Again, an interesting arc that is just so fun to watch. And I said this to Lennon while we were watching season 3. It's just those interactions between her and all her different characters and all her side characters. I just kept thinking, God damn it, how can Star Wars give us characters like Rey, and yet we can have characters like Dany and so many other great ones? It's just, God damn it. But yeah, no Star Wars today. But yeah, back to Thrones. Yeah, that will come. Hopefully in the next podcast, actually. But yeah, back to Thrones. I think those are my top 3 characters, and again, kind of generic really, because Jorah Mormont, as you said, he's such a great character with his own interesting story. Even Sansa, as much as we like to riff on her for her early treatment and how she's such an irritating child early on, she really does grow, and you come to care for her, and you also come to feel sorry for her. And it's where she is now. It's just so satisfying to see that she's got to this point. But
yeah, like I forget which season it is, but when she's with she goes to the Eyrie. She goes from a like that character who you don't really care about because she's just sort of whiny and like annoying. She goes from that in the series to a player in the Game of Thrones, which is just like such great character development. Well, I was just thinking, there's so many characters in this. You can just sort of go on forever. We can go on for like hours and hours about all the different characters we like, because there's just so many good ones. So I think I'll leave it for now. Maybe we could just have a separate character-based podcast, but that might be a bit stale.
Yeah, maybe one day.
Maybe one day.
But yeah, maybe we'll do a Let's Talk on it. But
maybe.
Okay, so favourite characters aside now, what were your thoughts on the show thus far, on season 1 to 7? Because everyone has their preference, but how do you feel the show has evolved and changed, and do you think it's kept its charm as it's gone on? Because if I remember rightly, season 1 actually wasn't a big hype. It wasn't until like season 3, when of course the Red Wedding happened, that the show kind of got this reputation for being the show that killed off leads in such a big way. Because I'm sure that there was a big hype for season 1. It's based on a very iconic book series, but I think it's around season 3 that it kind of hit the stride and people started calling it the best show ever made. And I think that's around the time that, yeah, again, things were starting to become big and iconic in pop culture for Game of Thrones. But how do you think about that? Do you think it's kept its charm over all these years?
Well, yeah. So with season 1, when I watched that for the first time, I like I said, I instantly fell in love. But when I talk to people about watching Game of Thrones, they say that season 1 is like the worst season, and they find it very difficult to get into it. But I completely disagree, because in my opinion, season 1, I think, is my favourite season. Not I don't think because of the story, but it's because it feels different to the rest of the series. The series after season 1, they're sort of into their stride, and they're sort of more, I guess, I think I'd use the word tame, because the series 1 is like full of like death and like gory imagery and like horrible sort of, stuff happening, and the rest of the series sort of gets progressively lighter on that sort of stuff. So series 1 is my all-time favourite, but because I haven't seen them since like series 7, I don't really remember much of the other ones. But I do remember that series 6 after series 1 is my favourite, because that's after the books have come out, so it's the writers of the show coming up with their own stuff, and that series is really like good on story and characters and set pieces. And then when season 7 came out, I felt that season 7 was a bit of a nothing series, because I guess that the point of that one was just to get everyone in the position they wanted for the last series. So that was sort of like a filler. Season 7 was like a filler series to get everyone in the right position for to start off Series 8. Like with Season 7, there wasn't much. Like, 'cause there was only 7 episodes, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there wasn't many episodes, and it didn't feel like much happened until like the last 2, when the wall came down and the Lannisters, were just like breaking apart, and
Yeah. It was all about kind of setting the end game.
yeah, but it was very much like a not nothing, because it was still brilliant and I still loved it. It's just it wasn't as good as the rest of the series, but I think that part of it is because they're not basing it on the books anymore, because they're past that. So what about you? What do you think of it?
Yeah, I think I do kind of disagree, but I think I can understand why people find it difficult to get into Season 1, because I actually did try and ask my dad if he would get into it, and he tried watching the first episode, but he just didn't like it, and his excuse was that it was a lot of talking, and I think that is actually one of the strengths of the series. I think that's why the early seasons were just so drawn in, because any show, I think, starting off can draw anyone in with good action and a good set piece and good, interesting stories. But I think the strength of Thrones for the early seasons was that it was mostly character interactions, and you kind of got invested. You got invested in the characters and the world, and you want to know more about what happened with this rebellion, who the Targaryens were, this connection with the White Walkers, if there was one with the Starks. It was all kind of character conversations, but it was just so interesting. You wanted to know more, and you wanted to get to know these characters more. And I think that's what the first 3 seasons did great, and why I think a lot of people kind of regard those 3, that trilogy, if you were, as the grounded side of Thrones. Because once Season 4 comes along, that's when, again, they start doing more fantasy stuff. They start embracing the White Walker threats, and they start setting up the end game in some long runs. I do agree, though, that Season 7 was also it was kind of like a drawn out series. Not even drawn out. It was more like more like crossing a drawbridge. Because Season 5 is the last series that really kind of embraces the books. Because after that, they had to go off material and use stuff given to them by George R. R. Martin in note form. And it does kind of show in some aspects. And it even started in Season 5, I believe. Because I remember everyone knows at this point, every Game of Thrones fan knows, that the Dawn storyline is not anything like it is in the books. And depending on your opinions, some people love it because if they haven't read the books, they can just accept it as it is. And I guess they can love the story for being a revenge side to it. On the other hand, if you're aware of the story and how it could have implicated for future setups in the final 2 books, like myself, I think it's a wasted opportunity, and it also kind of ruins characters in earlier seasons. I think the one everyone likes to point to is that when the Sand Snakes kill Marcella, they always go back to Oberyn's quote in Season 4 where he says, "We don't kill little girls in Dawn." And even though that can be interpreted in a different way, it's still kind of like, oh, it's said by a character that we all liked and was shown to be badass and is so interesting, we want to know more about him. But then you see these other characters who are not him, but trying to fight in spirit of him, and they do this terrible act that is in no way in spirit of what he said. It just kind of like putting you in a sour mood that, oh, so you are doing the opposite thing.
Well, technically they weren't in Dawn, or she wasn't in Dawn when she died, because she was off the shore.
No, but they still did the act. And I think it's not just her death, it's also that handling the story overall. Because I need to stop saying I think a lot. But, yeah, it's just...
it was a bit of a boring plot, because nothing much happened, except for Jaime fighting people.
And that's the thing, it didn't need to be. People would have loved it. I've heard people saying that... Yeah, I actually think Red Team Review actually did a great video on this, how would they have fixed Season 5. Check it out, I recommend it. And they said that it would have been so much better if Jaime and Bronn had gone on a road adventure to Dawn, and they got to explore that world of it, that side of the world. Because Dawn is itself because Dawn is basically its own Westeros, in a way. So it has its own culture, its own little corners of the world to it. And that's something that I think fans would have loved to have seen explored. But they didn't. They just showed us the water gardens. And the fact that we never get to see Sunspear as well is just... Again, for people who know the books, that's disappointing, because I think the books... I haven't read Feast for Crows or Dance with Dragons, but the show does skip out bits where that are set in Sunspear, and we get to know more about other characters in Dawn and their customs. I think there's a character called Ariane, who's one of Oberyn's daughters in the show, in the books, and she's a very prominent character in the books, and people expected her to have a central role. They would maybe have her be the one to call aid to Dany in the Battle of Marine. But in the end, it was just the Sand Snakes, who have technically no tie to the name of Martell, and they are bastards. So it just kind of makes me wonder, how could the city of Dawn, the country of Dawn, really, follow these bastards when they usurped their own royal blood? So it does kind of feel a bit weak. Not even weak. It just feels more like, oh, it's kind of playing with the rules here, and you couldn't have done. You could have just done this in like the books, and it could have been cut down still, but you could have still done it to that extent. Have you ever heard of the Dornish master plan?
It rings a bell, but I don't really remember what it's about.
It's basically as it kind of goes in the show, where House Martell is secretly trying to make a pact with the Targaryens to overthrow the Lannisters, but they try to keep the peace at the moment so that they can stay in the good grace of House Lannister. And I can't remember his name, but the Lord of House Martell. He's the cripple in the wheelchair. Mm. I know him mostly from Primeval, but he's he's basically pretending to be this frail old man, and we find out in like the last book that's released at the moment, To Dance with Dragons, I think, that he's not a cripple, or that he's not just a weak, pale man. He's just letting his family suffer because he doesn't want to act war. He's actually the mastermind behind a lot of things, and we find out that he's the ringleader behind this Dornish master plan. And the fact that we don't really get to see that play out, and he's just, as in the books, as we perceive, he's just the frail old man who just doesn't want war, and he gets killed because of it. It does kind of feel like a letdown of a story that they could have done more with. But yeah, sorry, we're getting back to the point, I guess. Series 5 is kind of a dipping point for some, and for me as well, because I do now know bits of the story that happen in the books that are not in the show that could have been interesting to see. Season 5...
Oh, is that like Stark? What's her name? Catelyn.
Yeah, that's another one of them, the Lady Stoneheart stuff. I understand actually why they did cut that, but it is also a shame because it does kind of open the doors for different stories they could have done. But yeah, sorry again, because we keep rambling. I'm sorry. But, yeah, I think season 5 has a dipping point, but I still enjoyed it, and I'm actually looking forward to see what Lynn thinks of it when we get to that. Season 6, I think, is actually all right. I still enjoyed it as it was, because it's the first season that kind of does its own thing, but it's still there's still elements of George R. R. Martin's skill in there, and you know that this is stuff that's clearly going to be tapped into when the books come out. But I also think that it also kind of misuses some plots, because I think the one that stood out to me, I think, in season 6 was the Arya storyline and the Umber storyline, where they just side with the Boltons, and there was this great. Again, this is kind of like proceeding from the books and disappointment, but there was this great theory going around about the Northern conspiracy, and it was believed that all the other houses are secretly working to overthrow the Boltons so they can bring back the Starks, and Rickon is secretly kept safe. And when we see him brought back in like one of the episodes, we think, oh, is he really a prisoner, or was this just a plan and it's part of a trick to basically turn on Boltons once the battle begins? And again, we kind of expected that wouldn't happen because it's going to be a battle. You've got to have this great grand scale event happen for the show and for the good guys to win and the bad guys to fall. But it's one of those sub stories that you think, oh, it would have been so interesting and not predictable, but it would have been so satisfying to see that play out. But it didn't, and sadly Rickon gets killed, and we don't really do we even get to hear him saying the lines in season 6? He says,
I think, no, not in season 6, but he says something in season 3, I think. So he says maybe one or two lines throughout the entire series.
He does have quite a few lines in the early seasons, but I don't think he says
he doesn't even, not even season 1. He says like one thing. He has like the least amount of screen lines for like a main character.
True, but he does have that conversation with Bran in a few points in season 3. But I do admit, I can remember now, he actually does not speak, outside of maybe heavy breathing, he does not speak at all in season 6.
No, he doesn't say anything.
Yeah, and
he goes, ah! When he gets killed.
Yeah, and I think it's just a shame, character-wise, because again, you kind of want the Starks to have this big reunion, and even after his death, you'd think they would make a big deal about it, about him dying, but he's not really brought up again until, I think, one passing mention by Dany in A Queen's Justice. So it's like, yeah, this is a clear point where you know they're starting to rush things, because they want to focus on other stuff and get to the end game. And I think that's where the big flaw happens with Season 7. Because I think it's not a running joke, but everyone knows that Series 7 is not the weakest, but it's definitely the fastest season. And to some people, they don't like that, because the first 4 seasons, even 5, they definitely laid the template for a show that relied on characters and the conversations. And the fact that we don't get a lot of that, I guess the best example I can give is that in a past season, a character would have said, I'm going to Dragonstone, and I'll be gone for a while. They would have likely gotten there by episode 3, something, maybe even episode 2 at least, or episode 4. It would have taken time to get there. They would have had more character interactions with certain characters to build on their unity, their relationships, and seen where it would have gone. And by that point, you're already invested in where that story goes, because you've seen it play out. With Season 7, it's clear that the writers have been doing this for a long time, and they want to go on to do other things. They've got Star Wars in their belt, so they want to get to that, and they want to end it, because it's been 10 years for them, and like 8 years for us since it started airing. But it's still a long bloody time. So, understandable, but when it comes to sacrificing the story, and I think this is always a problem with moviegoers, not moviegoers actually, with filmmakers, because on the one hand, you can understand their reasoning, because they have lives too. On the other hand, they're also working on something that's going to be remembered for generations to come. And you kind of feel like, we expect them to give it their all, regardless of how it affects them. I guess, which makes us greedy, which is true. But again, as it shows in the season, you can see why not everyone was happy. Because again, Jon arrives in Dragonstone in episode 2. He meets Dany by episode 3. He meets Dany by that point. They're already on good terms to an extent. They're already liking each other by episode 5, and they're already in bed together by episode 7, sorry. So it does feel rushed. And when you compare, I think someone mentioned that Jon's screen time with Dany is equal to that of his screen time with Ygritte. But the reason we love him and Ygritte together so much is because they spent so much time talking and conversing and getting to know them together as a couple. Whereas with Jon and Dany, we only get the political conversations that are tied to the White Walkers and the war for Westeros. There's not really a lot of moments where we see them talking in their chambers, or when they talk. I would have loved it if they kept the 10-episode format, and they would have had scenes together maybe on the beach, or they would have talked in the crypts of Dragonstone maybe, and she could have given him a history on the Targaryens that came before her, maybe giving us some more hints to Jon's parentage. I think it's stuff like that we were missing from Season 7 that really would have made it better. But again, as a whole, the season felt very rushed, and it was just such a shame, because you were looking forward to some of these characters to interact for years. Again, Jon and Dany, Arya and Bran and Sansa, even Tyrion and Jaime, who haven't seen each other at this point since Season 4. They were big moments that we were looking forward to, and they're not brushed aside, but they are very quick. Because they're to the point. Yeah. They want us to get to that certain event so they can show the White Walker to Cersei, and so they can finally get everyone ready for the big battle. So yeah, overall, for that segment, I think the show has to an extent lost its charm, in my book at least. But I don't think that makes it a bad series. I still think that it's one of the greatest shows ever made. I just think it's also flown back with time, which is a shame, because again, as I've said, the people behind this, they are human beings, and they've done this for a long time, and they've done amazing with it. But there's only so long they can keep up that charm to them. And I think Season 7 and bits of Season 6 and 5 do suffer because of that. I still think, though, it's a great series, and I still enjoyed Season 7 regardless. Although, I think we can all agree that Beyond the Wall was a very divisive episode. And flying ravens that are faster than sound or something, and Gendry being able to run to the wall even though he is not out of breath by the end, and Dany being able to get there to save them even though it should have taken her days.
I think it took her a day, because it was like, because then the raven going there, that should have taken a day.
Yeah, but it's...
Yeah. Everything's just faster in that series.
I just think it's a bad thing when even people behind like the world maps of Game of Thrones that even worked on the show will say that it would have taken them this long to actually get to the wall. So,
Well, the thing is, right? You know, Varys, he was with Daenerys at the end of the series, but in like the episode before that, he was with in Dawn. So it's like, how did he get from Dawn to Daenerys in an episode?
Because that can be an excuse that there's a passage of time between the cutscenes. But with Beyond the Wall, it's established that they only have a few hours until the ice hardens, until Jon and the others can be attacked by the Whites. So, and literally from the point where they send Gendry off, I don't think they said it on screen, but it's clear they've been travelling for a while, and it took them God knows how long to actually get to the wall, to Eastwatch. So, and because we've been with this world so long, and we know how long it takes for certain characters, I think it takes a month to get to Winterfell from King's Landing. So,
yeah, that's what they
again,
said.
It's the perceived rules of the world that we've already known for the past 6 seasons. And when they break that, even though they try to say, oh, don't pay attention to that, pay attention to the dragons, pay attention to the White Walkers, we can for the first viewing, I think. But when you think about it, that's when it kind of breaks the world, which is why I think people were very upset about the episode. Because even though it's a great episode, and it got some great moments to it, you can't deny that it's also breaking the law established. And there's no way of fixing it, really, which is a shame.
Have you played a game called Skyrim?
I have. I've gone through like a few campaigns, but I've lost touch with it a bit because I'm actually getting into some other stuff with Linden.
Yeah, well, you know, in Skyrim you can fast travel. That's what they were doing. They were just fast traveling, and you know, and the fact that in Beyond the Wall they couldn't fast travel was because there was enemies nearby. So there you go.
If that's your excuse, I guess.
I think that's literally the reason.
Yeah, but yeah. Do you have anything to add for the series thus far at this point?
Nope. I think I said all I wanted to say.
Cool. Likewise, I have as well. So yeah, going on to the next one, we can finally start getting our teeth into season 8 stuff. So before we get to the trailer, they released some character posters, and they also released like some stuff from Entertainment Weekly. So what are your thoughts on them?
Yeah. So before they released the posters, they released some sort of HD images of each of the characters, like not on the throne, just like stills from the episodes, and they were all very similar to Series 7. So nothing really changed except for Jaime, because Jaime's wearing proper Stark armor with the like the chest plate that sort of Jon and Rob wore. So that's the only sort of difference in that I've seen of that. But with the posters of hashtag for the throne, I really like the sort of theme of everyone sitting on the throne, because literally the point of this series is at the end who's going to sit on the throne and who's going to win. And I like that it's got everyone, even like Sam and the Night King. I think it's a really wicked sort of image for the poster. And there's a couple of parallels I've seen on there. Like Jon, he's doing the same pose that Ned was in the poster for Series 1. Which I think is a really cool parallel. But yeah, so I think But I think apart from that, I'm looking at them now because I've got them on loop. I don't think there's any other sort of imagery that sort of gives anything away.
I'm curious. What do you think of the For the Throne hashtag? Do you think that has a secret meaning to it?
Nah, I think it's just a sort of generic Game of Thrones thing that sounds cool that they can use for a hashtag.
Because a lot of people are actually saying that it seems to imply that this everything was all for the Iron Throne, and some people were against it because, of course, the White Walkers they don't have an agenda as we know it yet. They're not trying to take back the Seven Kingdoms, but that could change depending if we find out the Night King's motivation. But I actually do like the idea that there is some connection to the Iron Throne overall. But again, I would say that's a talk for another day, but it's just that I'm not really that versed in that side of the theory.
Well, that is literally the title of the show, so I think it has to be. They have to sort of like. I think if the series was called A Song of Ice and Fire, I don't think that would be the hashtag, because it's called Game of Thrones, so they're going to have to sort of put the throne imagery on there, aren't they?
Yeah. Again, it's like the same thing with the spin-off. If they are going to have it called The Long Night, they might have to end up, if they are going to call it The Long Night, they might end up calling it Game of Thrones in the with a colon, just to make sure people know it's a spin-off. I would hope they don't, though, but that's a talk.
I don't think they will. I hope they don't.
Yeah, I think The Long Night can stand on its own as a series for itself, especially if it's going to be not just a prequel, which I hope it's what it does end up doing. But back to the posters. I think the posters are great. I do think they are kind of weirdly edited, because some of them do look a bit off, especially Jorah's one. For me, it just does look like it's sort of photoshopped on.
Well, they are all photoshopped on, because it's the same image of the throne. It's just them sitting.
Oh, they are. Of course, we know that. But you know, it's their job to make it look as real as possible, and they didn't. Yeah, to some they just didn't look as genuine.
Well, it's just a poster, isn't it? It's not like.
Oh, it's not. It's nothing to make a big deal about. It's just like, if you want to keep that on your wall, it has to be one you like. But they're still amazing posters, and as you said, the parallels for season 1 makes sense, and it's also because Jon's the most Stark out of all the other Stark characters, even though he's secretly not a Stark. It makes sense, and I can imagine that being the box cover for the DVDs when that actually comes out. So,
that'd be cool.
Yeah, but now finally, we've been waiting for this to come out for so long. It finally came out last week. We can finally discuss the season 8 official trailer. So, what were your thoughts on that?
When I saw it, I was just sort of like, yeah, like I wasn't blown away, because everything sort of just seems like what I'd expect. Like, there's a sort of what's going to happen. I know it's a very sort of stupid summary, but it was the trailer did what it was sort of wanted to do. It showed enough to get us excited, but it didn't show us too much. Like, it didn't show us the interactions between characters who haven't met yet. But it shows like the dragons over Winterfell, and that's never happened before. But that's not such a big moment that it's okay showing in the trailer, but it's big enough to get us excited about the prospect of Dany being at Winterfell for the first time. I think first time? Yeah, she hasn't been there yet.
Oh, yeah.
No. And, like, I think there's a... sort of getting into the little detailed bits, I think, when there's a shot of the Unsullied army getting sort of ready, I think on the top of all their spears there's dragon glass, which I think is a cool sort of detail. So I think that's... And like, there's the bit where they're all sort of looking into the distance. So that's probably getting ready for the last... Yeah, the big... When do you think the big battle's going to be? Do you think it's going to be the last episode or like the second to last episode?
I think, and this is judging just from a story standpoint, how I think they've structured it. Because in my book, I think they've kind of put them into a predictable corner with the final season. So you expect there's going to be... Put it this way, this is how I think it's going to go. Episode 1 is going to be the arrival at Winterfell. It's going to be the interaction episode. We're going to see every character we've loved and been on this journey together with. We're going to see them finally come together and interact. We're going to see Jon and Arya reunite. We're going to see Jorah and Sam have a moment together, likely. We'll see Dany and Sansa maybe have a talk. And I think it's just going to be a full-on episode of callbacks to the pilot, because they did confirm that episode 1 has a lot of references and callbacks to the pilot. And that's even kind of glimpsed in the trailer as well, where you see the boy looking out of the army at Winterfell, and it's kind of paralleling Bran when he saw Robert Baratheon's army come to Winterfell. And even the promos that came out before the trailer, where Sansa says, "Winterfell is yours, Your Grace." That's pretty much word for word what Ned said to Robert when he came into the first episode. For episode 2, I think that's going to be more of a setup episode for the final battle, because I think they've said that episode 3 is going to be we're going to have the big battle, because that's also directed by the guy who did the Battle of the Bastards and Hardhome. So I think we know that already. And he's also directing like episode 5, I think. So I think 3 and 5 are going to be the big final battles. But
do you know what I think? You said that the big battle's going to be episode 3. I reckon, and this is getting into the rumours and sort of the fan theories and my own hopes, which is getting later into the thing, but since we bring it up now, I think episode 3, the big battle, is going to be a flashback.
Really?
But if you want me to... I can get into that later, because I think that's a big part of my sort of theories. But if you want me to get into that now, I can. Shall I wait for a minute?
You know what? Just... Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You did cut out for a second, but what did you say?
Should I wait and get into that later, or should I get into that now?
I'll get into it now.
Yeah. So I think episode 3 is the big battle is going to be a flashback, and I think that's going to be Bran going into the past to the long night, or the long night, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
The one of the first sort of battles between the living and the dead, with Azor Ahai and the Prince of His Promise fighting with what's the sword called?
I can't remember.
The burning sword.
No.
No.
The flaming sword or whatever.
yeah. Whatever it's called. I think that's going to be that battle, because they can't have the final battle be in episode 3. But if it's a biggest battle, that might be that one. But it's just my sort of speculations.
So you think we're not going to see the Battle of Winterfell? You think we're just going to see like a past battle that kind of gives us more context to the White Walkers?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I think... I don't know. I think we're going to have to see the heroes fight the White Walkers. And I also think there's going to have to be a defeat. Because I think, again, kind of in the predictable area of where it goes for the story, I think we know, even from the promotional material for the characters, that they're going to be back in King's Landing at some point. So I think what's going to have to happen is that they're going to have the fight at Winterfell, and we're going to lose a lot of characters. We're going to lose a lot of them, maybe it's the side characters, and maybe even a few main characters. Like, I can imagine us losing Grey Worm and maybe Varys, even Jorah, maybe. But I think that we might lose at least one central character. I think one of the big things going on at the moment, again, this is going into a bit of the rumours section, but hey, talk about it now, I guess, because we're lazy with our structure. But one of the big things going around at the moment is that apparently Jaime might kick the bucket in episode 3 after the White Walker battle. I would prefer not to, but we can get into that in a bit. But I think episode 3 has to be a big battle that with the characters making their last stand at Winterfell, and they will then retreat back to south, back to King's Landing, and that's where, of course, the big battle will finally end. But as you said, I do think there is going to be more context to the White Walkers, which they are going to have to explore maybe in like the first 2 episodes, maybe even like episode 4. Because I think the one thing that I've repeatedly told you, and even told Lennon as it goes on, without giving spoilers to him, of course, is that we don't really know the motivations for the White Walkers yet, why they're doing what they do. And people have made for years comparisons that it's just because it's their force of nature and they're a parallel for global warming, and they don't need an excuse. They're just the personification of death. Everyone has their own perceived idea of it, and I think Martin does too. But I think there has to be a motivation, at least for the show, because I think it adds more of a bigger context to the world. Because I think Martin has said that the others are their own race. They have their own culture, which we will be finding out more about when Winds of Winter comes out. So I think that if they touch on that at least, I think that would be a bit more of a weight to it. And I think the other thing Martin has said for years is that he wants his show to be more... He wants his book series, to be more unexpected and not stereotypical like Lord of the Rings. Because I think the best comparison he made was that he doesn't want the show to end with a big battle that decides the fate of the world. He wants it to be different, so maybe there'll be a political angle to it. And I think that's going to happen in the show, at least I hope it does, because I can't imagine the final battle ending with the Night King being destroyed by Jon, either because he kills Dany and her death ignites his sword that has the power to kill the Night King. It's so cliched, even though it's kind of been laid in the groundwork for the Thrones. To go through with it, I think it would be a bit on the nose. Whereas if it was something beyond that, and the Night King actually had a reason for doing what he does, and maybe even it can turn even some characters to think he's got a point. I think that would be a lot more compelling and even more shocking. I think, I won't go into that. We'll get into that for the previous section. But back to what I was saying, sorry. I think episode 3 and 5 are going to be the big battles, but I think it's going to be tied into the bigger plot. There's got to be some twist to them. It's not just going to be, it's battles, and then we end it there, and we just have these characters recuperate near the end and figure out what to do with the world. But sorry again, we do love our rambling. But I guess back to other bits of the trailer. So Arya Stark running through the crypts, running through Winterfell, I assume. Who do you think she's running
that
through?
is? I don't. Yeah, I don't know. Is it? I don't see who it could be apart from maybe if that's later in the series and she's running from the White Walkers, or because I don't. Is there going to be a battle at Winterfell for? Because the battle for the throne would be in King's Landing, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
If there was one. So I think if she is in Winterfell, that would be the battle for the Dawn, I guess. So maybe she's running from some whites or something.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I think we are guaranteed to see the Battle of King's Landing, and I think that will be the battle for the Dawn. But there's going to be a battle for Winterfell, and I think this scene has to happen at Winterfell because not only because it's the stone walls do kind of give this the fact that the room's so lightly lit, it's kind of have that Winterfell vibe. And I think the fact that Arya is being chased and she's clearly scared, and we haven't seen her that scared in a long time. I think since season 5, I think. But I think it's got to be at Winterfell because it's got to be the point where the characters are being beaten and they have to retreat. So I think Arya running away makes sense in the context of being the Battle of Winterfell. Because when it's the final battle, you want everyone to be at their game and you want everyone to have that moment before they perish. And I don't think people would be happy if Arya went out crying.
I don't think Arya's going to go out at all.
I think it's got to be White Walkers because I think you can see, if you pause it at the right moment, you can see silhouettes of people chasing her. I can only imagine it being the White Walkers because some have said maybe it's the Golden Company and they went up to Winterfell on Cersei's orders to help them fight the dead, but they're really there to fight them. I can't imagine that happening because it makes no sense. Cersei wouldn't send the only army that she's now got in her pocket to fight the bad guys who are her enemies, who are essentially going to be fighting each other against the dead. So it makes more sense for her to keep everyone that she knows is reliable to her and is in her pocket at King's Landing. And I think it makes sense for the characters at Winterfell, once the battle happens, that they would retreat to Cersei, the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Even though she betrayed them, she's their best chance of finding a place that's secure. People have said maybe like Storm's End could be a safe place for them to take up residence, but even then it's like it makes sense for the story for it to be King's Landing because it's where the throne is, it's where everyone's been more familiar with these past 7 seasons. So yeah, I think that makes sense in that direction for the story. But yeah, again, god damn it. Oh, so much rambling. But so we've also got Dany and Jon approaching the dragons.
Yeah, I think that might be I know everyone's like, oh, they're going to ride the dragons, but that looks like that's what's going to happen in that bit. It looks like they're about to get on and give him a ride, you know?
Yeah, it's not the first ride Jon's had. But
wow.
But yeah, again, it's expected for Jon at this point, and I think everyone would be hard pressed not to see him fly a dragon. And I wouldn't be surprised if those shots of the dragons flying over the north. I wouldn't be surprised if that is a segment where Jon and Dany are flying together. She's teaching him to fly, maybe. And
I'll have a look to see if they are actually on it.
Yeah, I think the likelihood is that they've just edited them out because they have done that with trailers before. I think the famous one that I can think of is the Hulk in Avengers Infinity War. Yeah. But I can imagine them doing that for this episode, for this trailer, and when we actually watch the episode, they are on the dragons, they are flying them, and I think Jon and Dany will finally. I think Jon is never going to know about his parents, and I think Dany is definitely going to find out as well. That's
what they're leading to.
How they react to it, I think that's the big thing that everyone wants to know, and I also want to know. How do you think he's going to react to her, and vice versa?
I don't know, man. He's going to be like, "Oh no, Jon Snow." I have no idea. Honestly, I'm not a writer. I don't know.
So do you have no expectations for how you'd want it to go?
I mean, he's going to be sulky and broody, isn't he? But apart from that, I don't really know what he might be like. Have a sort of existential crisis about what he's going to do with his life because he's now in line to the throne. I don't know. But maybe I think he'll just stay sort of the Stark way of like just not wanting power and just being, in the north and fighting for the living.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely going to be he's definitely going to have a character turmoil at some point, and I think if it's believed that each episode is going to be like 2 hours long, which I hope, I hope.
I don't think. I think it's an hour and 20 minutes max. I think.
Oh,
They've said.
damn it. Well, regardless of that, I hope we're still going to get a lot of character moments. Because again, I don't want them to do what they did with season 7. But I really hope
season 7 should have been Bran looking at flashbacks and finding a bunch of information, because that's. I'm going to get to this later, but in lots of my predictions, there's going to be lots of flashback stuff that we need to find to know the truth, and I don't think there's going to be enough time in this series to do that. So that's what last series should have been.
Yeah, I think they should have kept the 10-episode format and given us more character interactions, given us more scenes with Bran and his visions. I still think we're going to get something like that. I think either in the pilot, either in the first episode, or even the second episode, we're going to have something that's going to involve the White Walkers. And my biggest hope is that we find out their motivation, of course. That's tied to maybe like the pact from the Children of the Forest and the First Men. But yeah, I do think that they should have done more with earlier seasons, especially when it came to like the dividing point with the books. But back to Jon and Dany, I think they're going to find out. Of course, it makes sense.
Yeah, of course they do. That's what part of the entire series is leading to.
But I really do actually kind of hope that this is kind of weird, but I really actually do kind of hope that they stay a couple. Because as fucked up as it is, these are characters that we've been rooting for so long, and as per fantasy tropes, you expect the two hottest people with the most going for their story arcs to get together at some point. And Thrones is that rare series where they had so many storylines tied to it. You had so many characters to root for. The two ones that stood out the most, it would have made sense for them to cross paths at some point. I think there was not famous, of course, but there was a great story I read somewhere where one of the directors for the show, during the early years of the show, when it was like season 1, he remembered talking to George R. R. Martin, and Martin told him, it's all about these two characters, it's all about Jon and Dany. And the director was saying, what do you mean? I thought Rob was going to become the new hero. I thought he was going to take back the throne, avenge his father, become the new king, and how wrong he was. So I think, yeah, this pairing has always been set up in the series. So to have it finally play out, yeah, it's so satisfying. But also, it is bittersweet because, yeah, we find out they're related. But I actually would like the idea that they would find out about it, and either, this is a stretch, either Dany would be okay with it because she's a Targaryen and they have that history, so she's familiar with the concept of sibling relative marriages, relative marrying, whatever. Yeah, but she's relatively okay with it, and Jon learns to look past it. But at the same time, it makes so much sense for it not to go that way, because it would be a cruel twist and a bittersweet outcome for Dany to find out about it and turn against Jon. And maybe she flees Winterfell. She flees Winterfell before the battle, and she leaves them defenseless. And everyone gets mad at her. They lose their faith in the Targaryens, and we have to kind of put their angers aside when it comes to the final battle, so that they can work together and officially fight the dead together. I think that would be an unexpected, but a kind of expected outcome if they want to go that route, and they want to further the Mad Queen stuff with Dany, the Mad Queen's daughter. The Mad King's daughter, sorry. But, yeah, so back to Jon. I also think that he's the kind of character that would put on her first. He would want to tell everyone his truth, that he's not Ned's son, and he'd tell Dany, of course. But I just love the idea also that they can look past it and love each other, but it's also still fucked up because they are related, and that's not something that we can let fly by in real life. But it's a show, you can let things slide in TV, so just speaking as a fan, and as a fan of a show, I would love it if they were able to look past that difficulty and just embrace each other as a couple. Because if it is going to be a bittersweet ending for them both in the end, it would be nice to have them be together in the end. But at the same time, I can imagine them going the George R. R. Martin route where they make us bittersweet all the way through until the end.
Yeah, man.
I think the other thing that stood out for this episode, for this trailer for me, was Cersei drinking wine.
Yeah, I saw someone talking about that. Do you want to say what it means?
Yeah, from the implications at least, it seems to imply that either she's lost the baby, or she's gone she's further losing her sanity to the point where she doesn't care about the well-being of her kid, and she's just doing it for her own pleasure. She loves her drinks, of course.
She's just a bloody alky.
Oh yeah, the Lannisters and their drinking problems. But what do you think? Do you think?
Well, I thought in when she mentioned it in series 7, I thought, like, as soon as she said it, I was like, no, I think she's just lying to try and make Jamie stay with her and be close to her. So I think her drinking sort of further, illustrates the fact that she isn't pregnant and she's not going to have another baby. She's just saying it to try and force us to, or force Jamie, not us, she doesn't know about us, and force Jamie to feel sorry for her, and or not feel sorry, to stay with her and to be with her for, and not to leave, and another reason for her subjects to love her more is because she's having another child. But I think it's a lie. I think that's the sort of the thing that she would do. She would just lie to people. That's what she's done for the entire series. So I think that's what it is. I think it's just a plain lie. She's not pregnant.
Yeah, I think she is, and I think it's going to be another cool twist where she loses the child and she's going to go madder. I just think that makes sense. Again, especially when they could have made a big deal about it with her and Tyrion when they had that meeting. And I think that's going to have to play in somehow with Tyrion. Either he's going to... I can't imagine it, and I actually don't want to imagine it, but I can imagine that he has made a deal with her where it's going to involve the children, but because of Jon and Dany's potential child, if that comes to pass, that's going to complicate it, and it's going to fall back on Tyrion. Because actually, rewatching the earlier seasons with Linen, I actually do kind of understand now why Tyrion would betray everyone for his family, because he really is committed early on to the Lannister cause, to be there for his family, even though he secretly hates them to an extent. So it does, if you think of it in that context, because even though he suffered so much as the series went on, and he clearly has great reasons to betray his family and stick with Dany and everyone else, you can also understand why he would take the chance to also rekindle a connection with his family and continue the line with them connected to the Iron Throne, because he's a character that's been good at playing the game. So in a way, he would also want to take a second chance just in case things don't work out with the dead. But again, I think that's also going to backfire on him, because Dany's going to find out eventually, especially if her and Jon's baby, if it does happen, do complicate the matter.
I don't think that Tyrion will do something like that, because I don't think he cares about Lannisters anymore, apart from his brother. But I think that's only because he's his closest relative, not because of the name of Lannister. But also, this does lead into my into one of my theory, or one of the fan theories that I've seen. You probably know which one it is, but I'll get into that a bit later.
Okay, so we can finish off, I guess, with the last bit that kind of stood out to me. Because again, if there's any bits that stood out to you, you can say them now if you want. Was there anything in the trailer that you liked that you wanted to talk about?
There was something, I forgot it was, but I've got the trailer on loop here. So if you want to say the thing, I'll your final thought. I'll see if I can find it. What I was looking for.
So the last one I want to highlight is that the Battle for Winterfell. Again, we know it was going to happen at some point. The trailer does kind of hint to that. And the thing that I took away from that was that you see Jaime in the fight. So we know he's going to get there. He's going to pledge his allegiance. Looking forward to that. I am actually more looking forward to him and Brienne reuniting and fighting together, because I actually found out this theory actually quite recently. And it ties back into a scene where, in the books, back in a Storm of Swords, I believe, or Clash of Kings, Jaime has a dream when he's stuck outside, when he's tied to a weirwood tree or something, and it's a dream that's kind of tied with prophecies and implications for his future, in the books at least. But one of them is that he dreams he's in this dark chamber or something. He's in this dark catacomb or whatever, and he's with Brienne, and he sees like his father and his sister taunting him at something. And then they say, like, they throw swords at their feet and says, once the swords go out, because they're like burning with light or something, when they go out, you will die. And so him and Brienne grab the swords and they start thrashing them around at something in the darkness, so we don't see what it is. And some people have taken that as interpreting that they might be connected to the Azor Ahai prophecy. I don't. But I think it's a great thing that this could be a parallel scene to what's happening in the Battle for Winterfell episode, if we get to that, where him and Brienne are fighting the dead together with two swords, which are Valyrian steel made by the Sword of Ice, belonging to Ned Stark back in season 1. So I think if that's not connected, I think it's a great little subtle nod to that scene, because it does kind of make sense in the context. Other than really...
that is just a book thing, though, isn't it? Because
it's just a book thing.
Said that. I think some stuff like that, like dream-related things, because the dreams in the books are very sort of important, but I don't think, because they haven't really touched on them much in the series at all, I don't think they're going to come to fruition at all.
It's not something that's going to be heavily thought about or even discussed. I can guarantee it will probably fly over people's heads, but it's just something that I kind of like, if you connect the dots there, it does kind of parallel that scene from the books, and it's kind of cool. And I think it's just going to be cool itself, because it's Brienne and Jaime finally fighting together after so long. And I think after season 3, again, I did kind of see why people were so angry with Jaime in season 4 when he forced himself on Cersei, because you go for all that character development in season 3 and you think, he's got to put Cersei aside, he's got to go to Brienne, he's got to have this nice romance with her, maybe, if they could. And it's there, it's seeded there for them to possibly get together, but I guess the showrunners want to go as close to the books. But I can't recall if that scene happens in the books or if it's something for the show. But I still think that it's a shame, so I'm hoping we can finally see them to start to hit it off more. What do you think? Another thing, do you think Jaime and Brienne will get together, or do you think they're gonna pull our strings?
I don't think that the series really needs anyone else to get together at all, because they're not going to focus on that sort of stuff anymore. So I don't think they're going to bother. They're going to have a reunion, but I don't think they're going to get together. I don't think the show needs that anymore.
Yeah, because I kind of have in my head, it can either go two ways. Either the fan servicing way, where Jaime will either kiss her, but in the end he'll die, or if the rumor that he's going to die in the Battle for Winterfell is believed, he's going to basically tell her to leave. He's going to protect her. He's going to keep his vows, and it's implied he might try and kiss her, but the fighting has to keep his attention, so he doesn't. So it leaves us through going, you should have kissed her. I think that could play out. But yeah, I think this is more just for fans and fan service. I just think it'd be cool if they did, but as you said, it's not kind of what is on the priority for Game of Thrones, so it makes sense. And I think if there's one couple that I want, again, as I've said before, if there's one couple I want to at least have some tender moments before things start going sad, it's Jon and Dany, because it's just so expected, and they are so likable characters. But
also, they are the sort of main characters of the show, so that does have to happen, because they are the focus now.
Yeah. So yeah, could you find what the other thing you were
talking about? It was the battle. I think it's the Battle of Winterfell but the battle looks like it's like a red mist. So it's like a fire. The battle's in fire. So I don't know if that is at Winterfell, the scenes where there's like the red glow. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's got to be Dragonfire. I think it can be. Unless again it's trickery for editing, and it's actually the blue fire from Viserion, I think. The new Paramount for the Night King.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't think that. I think that would be. Oh yeah, possibly yeah. But it's just if that is at Winterfell, then it's probably that. But I was thinking if that wasn't the red bit wasn't at Winterfell, then that could be in King's Landing. But it gives sort of. This is another one of my theories, a parallel to Cersei being the Mad Queen, that she burns everything. And that's what that is. When there's the battle for the throne, then she tries to kill everyone, like everyone.
Okay. But yeah, okay, so if that's all to do with the trailer, unless there's anything else you want to add, we can go on to the...
No, that's everything from the trailer.
Cool. Okay, so getting on to the last two, really, because they're kind of like part of the same. So... What would you say are your favourite fan theories and rumours for the final season? Is there anything that's...
Okay, yeah. I've got a couple. I've got quite a lot, actually. So the sort of main one is the Azor Ahai and the Prince who was promised, prophecy. So it's been very clearly, if you know what the prophecy is, that in the long night, many, like thousands of years before Game of Thrones happened, there was another battle for the dawn where the dead were like going to kill everyone, and there was one prince who was promised, called Azor Ahai, who had a sword that was flaming, and he he won the war with his sword of magic. So it's been very sort of into that it's that Jon is the new. Oh yeah, and the prophecy is that Azor Ahai will be reborn to save the modern day, which is what happened in Game of Thrones, and that Jon is Azor Ahai. But there's also a couple of other characters that could be Azor Ahai, and that is and Dany is one of them because she does fit into lots of the categories of what the Prince Who Was Promised is. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. So you think that the Azor Ahai prophecy is going to come true in either Jon or Dany?
Yeah, well, or there's another one that I thought from watching the trailer. I think possibly. I know you just said you don't think it is, but I think Jaime might be the Prince Who Was Promised because a part of the prophecy is that the Prince Who Was Promised had a wife who he loved dearly, and he killed her to make the sword. Like he plunged the sword into her heart to temper it, and that's what made the sword. So I was thinking that could be either Jon killing Dany, Dany killing Jon, or Jaime killing Cersei, because Cersei has to die at some point. And in her prophecy by the Frog Lady, it was her younger brother is going to kill her. So that might be the two prophecies in sort of joining into one. So
okay.
Do you want to say one and then
sure
we'll do one at a time?
Yeah, we'll go back and forth. But yeah. Sort of tying into that one, this is I actually kind of want to set this one for last because it feels so big, and I don't know if you know this one. So yeah, I'll say that one for last. But
what's it called?
If even telling you the title is kind of like a spoiler.
Okay.
You know what? Fuck it. I'll just tell you it.
Well, tell me the title, and then we can leave that one to last because I might have something on that one as well.
Jon Snow becomes the Night King.
Ooh, I didn't know that one. So okay, do leave that for the end.
Okay, so tying into the Jaime and Cersei thing, this is one that I think this is a fanfic that's been going on for years, and it's nothing new, but it's something that kind of like feels like, oh, it's got to happen in the final season. And I do kind of agree with this, is that Cersei will die at the hands of either Jaime or could be Arya using Jaime's face.
I saw that one today. I saw that. Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah,
do explain.
I think again, if Jaime is to die sacrificing himself against the Whites and the Undead and the White Walkers, it would be such a bittersweet and almost twisted poetic scene to have Jaime come to Cersei in her chambers, and she thinks it's him when the final battle is happening at episode 5 or whatever, and she embraces him, and you find out he's killing her, and she takes the face off, and it's Arya. That's fulfilling the prophecy, but also kind of giving Arya her revenge.
And her list.
Yeah, and it's also unexpected, even though, again, fan theory-wise, it's been going on for years. But to see it actually play out, because again, everyone's kind of invested in the Jaime and Cersei killing each other thing so much, I think it would be unexpected to kind of have it be Arya. And also because, again, it's Jaime coming back after we saw him die. So it's a nice little moment there, too, even though it's bittersweet. But yeah, do you have another one you want to talk about?
Yeah. So the next one is another big one, and that's the 3 head of the dragon sort of theory and prophecy. So that I can't remember the exacts of the prophecy, but it said that there will be 3 sort of heads of the dragon, 3 Targaryens.
The prophecy is that 3 heads of the dragon will join together and fight the undead, being Jon, who is the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, Dany, who is the daughter of the Mad King, and Tyrion, who is the illegitimate son of the Mad King and Tywin's wife. And again, that kind of ties into the why Tyrion hates Tyrion things, because he was a Targaryen, but he refused to kill him because he had the Lannister name and he didn't want to spoil the Lannister. He didn't want to basically soil the Lannister name.
And also, one of the sort of big plot point in the series about that is that when Tywin dies, he says, "You are no son of mine," sort of enhancing the theory that he isn't his son.
True, but I also think that this is taking a leaf out of Alt X Shift. He does great Game of Thrones videos. I think I actually might have shown him to you a while back, but he actually talked about this theory, and how he explains it in the end, I think makes sense, which is why it's not going to happen, because wouldn't it make so much more sense in the world of George R. R. Martin for it not to be all connected, for prophecies and heroes uniting? Wouldn't it be so much more real if it was just because Tywin was a selfish man who hated his son? Because I do like the idea of Tyrion being a secret Targaryen, but in my own headcanon, if that was true, they would have touched on it by now. I actually could have imagined them doing something in season 5.
That is literally why I said that season 7 should have been the flashback and the exposition series, but with Tyrion becoming a Targaryen, it should have been that series, not in this one, if it's going to happen.
But yeah, I just think that's something they would have done by now. They would have acknowledged, and I think had season 5 been done differently, they could have done a bit of context. In the books, there's a subplot where a Martell goes to Meereen to try and make a pact with the Targaryens with Dany by marriage, but she says no. And so he tries to steal one of the dragons, but he ends up getting burnt in the process and he dies. And that's it for that story so far. But I kind of feel like had that played out in the show, they could have maybe had a scene where Tyrion sees this Martell or whatever scheming to take the dragons, and he tries to intervene, and the dragons burn both of them, but we find out that Tyrion is immune to fire. And that could have been the big reveal, that he finds out he's a Targaryen. And when the season ends, when Varys approaches him saying, "I'm here to help you take back Meereen from the Harpies," it could have been the big reveal that, oh, you are a Targaryen as well, by the way. And that could have been a focal point for Series 7, for Series 6 as well. So instead of him just telling jokes and talking with Missandei a lot about other stuff for a lot of the first half of Season 6, it would have been a lot more interesting to find out that, oh, you are a Targaryen. You have all this history and now you know. I think that's how it would have gone in my head had they gone through with that. But because they didn't, I think it would be too late in the game to kind of drop that bombshell. And also, it doesn't really matter, because in a way, again, because they've got the Jon and Dany subplot that's eventually going to clash between each other when they find out he's a Targaryen too. To add in another one with Tyrion would just be like, I guess, confusing. I don't know. It's just. I think it's just one thing that's a cool idea, but it's not going to come to fruition on the show. It could be in the books, but I also think that it's not in George R. R. Martin's way. It's just one of those clever ideas that fans have kind of built on over the years that could happen, but it's not expected to happen, I think. At least in the eyes of Martin.
Back to the three-headed dragon sort of theory. Part of I've sort of changed it because of what happened in Series 7 with the death of... who died? Which was the dragon who died?
I think it was Viserion.
Viserion.
Viserion, or it was Rhaegal, Drogon, and Viserion. See, it was Viserion, sorry.
Yeah, it was Viserion because he was a dickhead.
It wasn't.
No, not the dragon, the person who was named after.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He was a bastard.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he wasn't, but because of that, do we know who the Night King is before he was the Night King?
There are some rumours surrounding Season 7, actually. One rumour is that he's apparently one of the former kings of Winter. He was actually a Stark before the time of Man.
I've heard that, he could be a Stark, but what if, right, listen, what if he's a Targaryen, and he is the third head of the dragon, because he's got a dragon, and I was riding it. Boom. Maybe. Got in your head there. Wow. Well, that's my own little theory. But no, I have no facts apart from the fact that he can ride a dragon to put onto this theory.
That could be interesting. Because going into that, actually, if you look at the Entertainment Weekly photos of the Night King, there's a close-up of his face. If you look into his iris, you can see his eyes are kind of shaped like the 7-pointed star. And I can't remember another YouTuber talked about this, but they give the idea that maybe the White Walkers are carved out the personification of death, so they are, in a way, essentially it boils down to all the gods that we know about in Thrones, the Faith of the Seven, the Faithless Men's gods, the Death, and you've got the Lord of Light. They are all part of the same god, it's just been interpreted differently. And I think the Night King is the true personification of death. I think that can maybe tie into that. He's an ancient Stark that built off this religion based off his actions. Maybe that could be part of it. But then I don't know much about that theory. I just know that it would be cool and it would be interesting if the Night King was connected to the Stark bloodline. And this is a story for when we actually talk about the spin-off one day. But if that is the case, I think that opens the doors for them to explore some new stuff with the White Walkers in the spin-off, if that does happen. But yeah, we'll talk about that another time.
Have you got any theories or speculations that you want to get into?
Yes, I do. One of the other ones is that the White Walkers' true motivation is the pact that was made by the Children of the Forest and the First Men. I think one of the things I would love them to do for the White Walkers, if we find out the reason they're doing all this, is because they want to basically is to continue the pact that was made. Do you know about the pact story?
No.
Okay, so the basics is that thousands of years ago, the White Walkers stopped their takeover of Westeros by making an alliance with the First Men and the Children at the Isle of Faces. And the thing that everyone kind of talks about is that, the theory at least goes, is that they made a deal that the White Walkers would stay north. In return, man would continue to live their side of the realm, but in return they'd do sacrifices to the White Walkers, because that's how they create more White Walkers. So they'd continue their line by sacrificing humans, and in turn they would leave the humans alone. However, as time passed, man forgot the pact, and they said, no, we don't want to keep making these sacrifices, so they stopped them. And I don't know if that happens before the Long Night or after. I can't remember. I don't know. There's so many aspects of world building to Thrones, but it boils down to they stopped the pact, and the White Walkers started to go extinct. But they were able to build up their armies generations in the making, and eventually they got to the point in Thrones where they started coming back. So I think when they do finally breach the wall, which they did in season 7, it would make sense that they're slaughtering everyone until they find the right person to lead them, which leads into the final fear, which I'll talk about. But it would be such a twist if you find out that they're not doing what they do just because they are a personification of evil, or just because they're doing it because they want the throne, or because they're bad guys. Because it would be so George R. R. Martin to have the end series not be determined by a battle, but be determined by a political act. And it would be so interesting to see how everyone would react to this, that, they just want us to continue a tradition that's not good, but it will guarantee the safety of the realm, especially if we continue it. I think that's one that I've kind of stuck with for a while, and I really want that to happen. Because again, I've talked this to death in this podcast so far, but it would be so fitting for Game of Thrones to end on such a unexpected level, and it does make sense for Martin not to end the series not in a way that's reminiscent of Lord of the Rings or every other fantasy genre.
Yeah, I think they have to end it in some sort of way that is different to how everyone expects it to, because like you said, it's not George R. R. Martin or Game of Thrones to just end it with a big battle for good to defeat evil, because that's not what Game of Thrones is about. Game of Thrones is about the political nuance and the very intricate and detailed plots with lots of different characters, not just good and bad, but everyone in between. And to end it on a sort of, the bad guys are dead and all the good guys are still alive, it's not Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I mean, as Jorah said, there's a good and evil on both sides of the world. To find out that the White Walkers have a good side, not a good side, but they have a moral side, that they don't do this just because. That would be such a shocker. Yeah, I can just imagine so many reactors just reacting to that scene when it happens, if it happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you have any other?
I have quite a lot. I've got a couple that are related to the Night King. So one of them is that the way the Night King was sort of created is because the Children of the Forest put a bit of dragon glass into his chest, and I've heard that a way of them, I guess, saving the day as such, is to get that piece of dragon glass out of him. So then that breaks the curse that he can control all the dead, and that's how they win. That's one of them, but that again is a very sort of basic plot of good versus evil, and how all the enemies die at once, like in the Avengers when the wormhole closes, so therefore all the the people die. It's like a very easy out. So that's one of them. I don't think it's going to happen because it's not well thought through, and it is just sort of very convenient. So I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, backing off of that, actually, when they introduced the concept that if you kill a White Walker, all the dead will follow in Season 7, I think everyone went to that theory that, Jon's going to have to kill the Night King and save the day. And I think if that does happen, as you said, it really is against kind of what you expect from Thrones. And it is also cliche, because the fact that it's introduced in the last season before the final, it does also kind of feel like, you're clearly just adding to the setup here that you wanted to do because you want to get this over with. And you can imagine, it's got to be more integral and more different and more unexpected in the books. So I also don't think that's going to happen. It's interesting, and it does kind of make sense in context to that, but it also feels like, it's very basic. And we don't want basic to end Game of Thrones.
You want something different and unexpected.
Yeah, again, I want us to have that feeling of like the Red Wedding or Ned Stark's death, where we're going, what? And even though some of us can say, we saw it coming, it's still like, shit. But yeah, do you have any others? Because I've got some, but I've not got a lot of them detailed as you.
I've got 1, 2, 4, about four left. Have you got any more?
I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Technically 5, but I can simplify them.
Okay, so you can. Do you want to do your next one?
Oh, I've got 6. Sorry.
Okay, do you want to start with your next one? Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I think the series will end with the royal houses becoming independent of the Iron Throne. I think the perfect way to end Thrones that feels... Put it this way, we've been told ever since Season 5 that Dany wants to break the wheel. And even though we kind of expect her and want her to sit on the Iron Throne and bring Targaryens back to the forefront of the kingdoms, I think it also makes sense for them not to. Because, again, you don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. And to have the series end with them back where they started, with the Targaryens in control, I just don't think that would make sense. Especially when it's been set up so much that they need to change things from the natural order. It would be great for it to end if the Iron Throne is melted down, or it's destroyed, or Dany approaches it. She's about to touch it, as she does in the vision from Season 2, in the House of Undying. But then she realises that she can't fall like her father did. She can't become the Mad Queen. She can't rule everyone. She needs to go through with her plan and break the wheel. So the Iron Throne is destroyed. There's no more ruling monarch. Instead, every kingdom is given their own independence. And that kind of bleeds into real life, where we have UK, we have America, we have independent countries. So it would make sense for Game of Thrones to go for a similar route. And who knows, maybe Dany can rule the Stormlands, the areas like King's Landing and Dragonstone, and maybe Tyrion can rule another side. I don't know. But the point is, I think it makes sense if it would end with every faction becoming independent, and it ends the Iron Throne reign permanently. Because, again, per George R. Martin unexpectedness, I can't imagine them just going back to the beginning. Because, again, it kind of lingers with, so what happens now? Do we have another 100 years of peace, or do we have another uprising where the Targaryens die down the line? Because I think the idea is that we expect Thrones to end in a way that's going to guarantee a decent future for everyone. Because it's going to be bittersweet, but I think that for the rest of Westeros, it's got to end in a way where we kind of feel like, it makes sense that things would change this way, especially when we've been told over and over again that things can't remain the same. So yeah, that's what I think of that one. And just to reiterate, just so if everyone's wondering, these are not theories that we came up with personally. A lot of this is basically stuff we've heard, and some stuff we might have added here and there, but we're not taking any independent claim of these theories. It's just fun to talk about, as anything is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any others you want to talk about? Well, I'm still.
So my next one is, I think I'll get into. Okay, so Daenerys Targaryen. I saw this one today, and I can't remember the specifics of it, but Daenerys becomes the Night Queen. So she goes beyond the wall, and I don't know how it's going to happen, but or the specifics of this, the person who've come up with this theory, but it was Daenerys will rule the beyond the wall with the Night King, and that's how they get out of the big battles, because she just falls on that side of the wall or something like that. It was a very I didn't look at the theory properly, and it was quite a weird one, but it's interesting and it's different, so that's why I thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah, it does sound kind of like an alternative to the Lisa Nisa story where Jord has to kill Danny to create Lightbringer. Maybe in this version it's like, oh, he sacrifices herself to save the world by giving in to the Night King and becoming her queen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, but I also can't imagine that. Again, as you said, it does kind of feel like a not fleshed out theory. So it just does feel like, it feels like, yeah. We've been talking for a while. My voice is starting to get sore. Yeah, I don't know. It's a cool theory, but I just don't think it's something that will happen.
No, probably not.
Yeah. The other one I have is that this is probably one that I actually thought of a few days ago. And again, I don't know if this is something people have thought of already or just something I came up with. I don't know. I don't care. I just want to talk about it. But this one kind of ties into the Arya stuff, with Arya killing Cersei. She could use Littlefinger's face to enter King's Landing and convince Cersei to let everyone in. Maybe that's how she lets everyone back into King's Landing, so that when the final battle happens, they're all on the same side. And I don't know. It feels like this is something that would only happen just so the team could get Ian Glenn, is it, who plays Littlefinger? They could just get him back for the final season.
No, that's
the final season.
That's Jorah.
Oh, okay, but yeah, whoever the actor who plays Littlefinger, I just think that this is a theory that was kind of built up just because it's an excuse to get him back for the final season, but it also kind of makes sense in some regard. But I like this theory. It actually does kind of make sense for a way to get Cersei back on their side, especially if she's going mad. In that regard, I don't know. Again, sorry, my voice is getting really sore. Yeah, what's your other theory?
So another one that I've heard quite a lot about is that sort of a parallel to Robert's Rebellion is Cersei actually becomes the Mad Queen rather than Daenerys. So Daenerys is the Mad King's daughter, but Cersei, in her sort of like grief, becomes the Mad Queen and just wants to burn everything because she's mad and she's drunk. So that's that. Have you heard about that one?
I have. Again, it's sort of seeded throughout early seasons as well, especially in like season 4 when she says that she'll burn the house to the ground if Tywin and Marjorie hurt Tommen. That I think those. I think that does kind of lay groundwork for that theory to happen, and the fact that she's so insistent on staying as queen in season 7, yeah, I can imagine that, and it does sort of make sense because I can't imagine Dany again returning the Mad Queen mantle and turning against everyone, because it's again she's a main character that's been built up for these past so many years, so it would be kind of unexpected. So it would be kind of an expected. I guess some expected, but again, it's like you don't want the hero you're rooting for to become the bad guy out of nowhere after building up and hoping for them to be the hero for so long, I guess. So it makes sense for Cersei to take up that mantle, and it also it also does tie into the reason for Cersei to be killed by Jaime or Arya. Yeah, the other theory I have, again I keep saying that, but the other theory I like is that, and I hope that's going to happen, is that Clegane Bowl will happen at last.
Yeah,
I think that's got. They even tease that in the Entertainment Weekly posters. So
yeah, with the two together,
yeah. If that doesn't happen, they really are just teasing us at this point. Because I think this theory has always been there in the fandom, but it definitely got big again when the Hound came back in season 6, and people thought, is he gonna fight the Mountain in act of the faith? Because he's a faithful man now or something. And then in season 7, when we thought, is he going to fight the Mountain in the final because he's finally seen after all these years? I think now it makes so much sense, especially if the battle for the spring happens at King's Landing. And some people have thought that maybe the White Walkers, when they attack, they can maybe take over the Mountain's corpse, because he is a corpse at this point. So maybe that will give the Hound an excuse to fight him beyond just, you're my brother, I hate you, I want to kill you. Yeah, never saying to it really. It's just a fight that we've been waiting to see for years, and I hope they do deliver. But it would be so frustrating if they didn't do it.
I think they will do, because they don't want to. In their series 7, I think a bad bit of it was there was lots of fan service. So in this one, I think they're going to stay away from the fan servicey bit. But saying that, a bit of fan service that will bring, I think, will be Clegane Bowl at some point. I don't know when, if at all, they will do it in story wise. But I think if there is a battle for the throne, then it would be during that rather than during the battle for the Dawn.
Yeah, I could imagine it being episode 5 when they have the big battle. If again, I keep saying this as if it's going to happen, but again, for all we know, it could be in the final episode. But I think episode 5 is going to be the big final battle, and I think that would be the point where it would make sense for the Hound to fight the Mountain, especially again if the final battle is at King's Landing. But yeah, do you have any of your other theories?
Yeah, I've got 2 more. So the sort of the big one I'll get into first is that I hope that this really happens, because I wanted this to happen in series 7, but it didn't, and I really hope it happens in this one. But Bran is going to do a bunch of time traveling. So one of the theories is that Bran is the Night's King, and I don't understand how. I don't know how that's going to work out. So that's one of them. And the other one is that Bran is Bran the Builder, and he makes the wall back in whenever the wall was made.
The first day, I think.
Yeah. So, and another one is that Bran goes into the mind of the Mad King, and that's how he becomes mad. Like sort of the way that Hodor becomes really simple is because Bran went into his mind in the past, and he'll do that for the Mad King. So that's why he becomes mad, and that's why he says burn them all. And he doesn't mean burn everyone he knows. He means burn them all, as in the White Walkers, and that's why he says it. But people just misinterpret it. And I think there's some other Bran time traveling stuff. Oh yeah, Bran seeing the long night, and that's how he knows how to win, is because he goes and looks at it and tells and sees who the prophecy means.
Yeah, I actually like that theory, and I really hope that happens, because again, not only does it give us more context to hopefully the origins and the motivations of the White Walkers, but I actually would love them to kind of give them the chance to show us more historical stuff that we know from the books and the show, because we've known for a long time that if they were ever going to do a spin-off, it was not going to be on Robert's Rebellion, because that would have been covered too much in the show, and Martin himself has said that he would rather they keep that just for the Game of Thrones TV series. And Duncan and Egg is something that they could do down the line, but he's also said that he wants the show to be made he wants Duncan and Egg to be made into a show or a film series once the books are done, and that's going to be God knows how long, because he wants to finish the main book series before he even finishes any other spin-off stuff. But I like the idea of Bran using visions again. If that's to reveal that he's the Night King, or if that he's Bran the Builder, I think they would be cool. However, I think they would also be a hindrance for the spin-off, because I think we do know that the spin-off, again, talking about spin-offs again, but to hell with it, I'll talk about it. I think the spin-off is definitely going to be exploring more of the history behind the White Walkers, House Stark and the other houses before the Iron Throne and the Game of Thrones. And I think that stuff like Bran the Builder is stuff they could explore with that. And I can actually imagine Bran the Builder becoming a main character as the series goes on in the spin-off. So if they were to do that in the show with Bran, it'd be cool. But I also think that kind of puts them in a tight corner with that character if they were to do that with Bran. I do like the idea of Bran using his visions to see past histories in glimpses, because I actually read an article a while back talking about some alleged leaks of stuff that would happen with Bran. I can guarantee you they're not true, but they are interesting ideas. And one of them was that he sees visions in episode 2 of the first hero, the last hero who fought the White Walkers during the first long night. And he also sees visions of Aegon the first Aegon Targaryen's first conquest of Westeros, and him having Torrhen Stark bend the knee to him. So nice little tie to the Targaryens' past. And he also has a vision of a hedge knight walking with his squire in the King's Road, which is a clear nod to Duncan and Egg. I think stuff like that, small visions that, and even sees like Battle of the Trident with Rhaegar and Robert Baratheon when they're young. I think if we saw stuff like that, I think that would be very good. Also, because it's fan servicey, but it's not blatant fan servicey. It's not blatant.
It's stuff that we already know about that we just want to see.
Yeah, it gives us more context and more
stuff
scenes
that we want
to that, and it also kind of gives us an eye opener of what those scenes could have been like. Yeah.
I mean, I'd really like to see the Battle of the Trident.
Oh yeah, I would too. The other thing I have to say is that for the theories is that apparently Arya and Gendry will get together. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I think this is blatant just fan service, and I don't think this will happen.
Like I said when you said about how Jaime and Brienne will get together, I don't think they're going to focus on people getting together in this one because they don't have time. They need to just focus on the main story. So to focus on them to people just in a relationship, it's a waste of time, and it's a waste of because there isn't enough. There's only 6 episodes in there in this series, and people focusing on people getting together isn't the priority.
Yeah,
so I don't think that will happen.
I think the only reason this thing is talked about is because of that one scene in season 3 where Gendry and Arya are talking, and she says, "You'd be my family," and he says, "No, you'd be my lady." And I think that kind of blew up proportion with the fandom because, if I recall rightly, I don't think there's any chemistry of romance between her and Gendry at all in the books. I think half the time she actually just talks about killing him because she wants to get away from their company because she knows they're a potential threat to her. In the show, I think they just put that in because they wanted the characters to have a nice moment together, and I think the fans kind of went, "Oh, they like each other," and also I think it just doesn't really, not story wise, but just as actors, it's also kind of weird because like the actor who plays Gendry is like in his 30s, I think, and
no, he's just like late 20s.
No, I think he is in his 30s or whatever. He's old enough to be. He's old, and
well, he's not though. He's not. Let me have a look. I'll have a look.
He's not old, but you get the idea. Like, Maisie Williams is like, she's like a young woman now, but
she's like 20, isn't she?
Yeah, I think 22 or 21.
Yeah.
But the point is, she's a lot younger at the time when they filmed that scene, and even now, even though she is at a decent age now to be in a relationship with the actor of Gendry, it does kind of feel weird that they, in the show at least, they'd get together. But at the same time, you kind of have to put into context that it's a show in a world that is okay with people of all ages marrying different people, even though it's fucked up in some regards. But I think, for a story point of view, it just doesn't need to happen, because I can imagine they are going to have an interaction, and they are going to have a unite, and there's going to probably be some emotional stuff between them. However, I don't think she's going to pull him to the side and kiss him, or anything like that that's going to make the fans go, "Ooh, yay!" Because I think that's just, again, as you said, it's too fan-servicey. Also, it doesn't really fit with Arya's character, because she's always insisted she doesn't need others. She just wants to have a life of adventure. She doesn't want to live out her days as a wife trapped in a castle with a king or prince or lord. So I can only imagine that her ending would have to be her going off, as she said in season 6, where she'd go off into the world and see what's beyond west of Westeros. With Gendry, I can only imagine his ending being that he either dies in the final battle, or because he's the last Baratheon, he will be legitimized by Jon or Dany or whoever's left, and he will become the new ruler of Storm's End. Yeah, it just feels like too much of a fan servicey-esque thing to happen. It would be nice.
Be nice though.
But it's nice. It kind of does have a nice little moment to it where you think that, oh, they got together again in the end, even though whatever. But yeah, I can't imagine it happening. It just seems too up there with the fan services, and it would make the fans too happy. And Game of Thrones is known for making people unhappy, so they want to keep up their reputation. But, what do you have one last one before I get into my last one?
Yeah, my last one is that the entirety of what we're watching, Game of Thrones, the TV series, in the end, we'll realise that it's been written by Sam, and Sam's going to write the entire history, and that's how we're seeing it because of his book, because when he's in the Citadel and he's talking to Professor Slughorn, he says that that he's writing the book. I think it was called The Chronicles of the Wars After the Death of King Robert Baratheon, and then Sam says, "Oh, I think it's good, but you need a poetic a name that's a bit more poetic, which is a Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire." So that this is a nice. It's not like a big sort of major thing plot wise. It's just like a nice sort of thing that at the end of it will probably be maybe an older Sam writing it in the Citadel or something like that's how it's going to like properly end. Like the last shot will be of Sam writing it or publishing it or whatever.
Yeah,
but it's not like a thing for to question. It's just sort of a thing that's like, oh, that's what's happened.
Yeah, and that theory really blew up in after season 6, didn't it?
Yeah, it's when Sam was in the Citadel.
Yeah, and isn't there another one tied to that George R. Martin will play an older Sam?
That'd be good. I like that.
Yeah, I actually would love it if he got a cameo, because again, we know that from the unaired pilot, he actually did have a cameo as one of the noble Pentos men who gave a gift to Dany on her wedding, but they scrapped it because the pilot was so bad. And he was going to have a cameo in the Red Wedding, but he was committed to books at the time, so he couldn't be there to film it. So I really do hope he does get a cameo in the final season. But I think I have read somewhere that he wasn't anywhere in Belfast or wherever they were filming at the time. So it's a possibility, and kind of more likely that he didn't film anything because he is so preoccupied with Winds of Winter. But it would be nice, and I do like that theory.
I mean, he has to have a break at some point, and to do a cameo for the last series is something that I think he would do.
Yeah, it would be nice. But back to the theory, sorry. I actually do like that theory, but I don't know, actually. I can't actually imagine. I've never thought how I would imagine the last scene of Game of Thrones to be. I guess I think that would make sense, and it would be a nice way to end the series on. And it does make sense in the context of it's a story told down from the view of a maester, and who better than the maester that we've come to know and care for out of all of them so far. Let's face it, we wouldn't want Maester Pycelle to be writing it.
No. He's dead, isn't he?
Oh yeah, thank God, thank the gods. But
I wouldn't mind if Slughorn was in it again.
Yeah, I still wish he'd been I can't remember who his name is in the books, but he's a character. There's a maester in the books we find out is loyal to the Targaryens, and I would have loved it if him. I would have really hoped it if he was that character, but he's just the Grand Maester in the end, I think, which is a shame because he's a good actor.
Yeah.
But
so what's your last final theory?
Yeah, and do you have any others, or is that it?
No, that was my last one. Yeah.
Cool. My last one, and this is the one I'm really hoping for, is that Jon Snow will become the Night King. Now, you haven't heard this theory, have you?
I don't think I have.
Okay, we've sort of touched on bits of it that tie into it before, but the basic crux is that we find out that the Night King made a deal with this pack years ago, and it was broken by the First Men, so that's why he's doing what he does. He's attacking humanity so that he can get back at them, because he wants the pack to be continued. He wants the pack to be again, part of Game of Thrones laws and rules. When you make a deal, you expect the deal to be made. You expect, again, as with Walder Frey and the Starks, when they made a pact that Robb would marry one of the Frey daughters, and he didn't go through with the pact, so they betrayed them. Same thing with the Night's King and the First Men. They broke the pact, so he's getting his revenge, but he wants the pact to continue in some form. So this idea is that Jon will find this out, either by Bran or by Sam in the books or whatever, or it will come to them in some form, and Jon will realise that the only way to beat them is to make the pack bring back the pack, essentially. Better ways to word it. But essentially he will sacrifice himself to become the new Night King and become the first sacrifice. And he makes this rule when he leaves, after he leaves, that I will lead the dead back north. I will keep them there for the rest of my days, and when the time comes, you will continue to sacrifice humans to the White Walkers and let them continue their line, and we'll make things of a similar ground. It won't be nice, it will be bittersweet, because, again, they're giving up human life, but it will be for the greater good, because it will ensure the White Walkers will not hunt them again, and it will bring everyone in the corners of Westeros together as a United Kingdom. Not that, but as a united country with independent kingdoms. So you'd have, so when Dany, if she survives, if she does break the wheel and every corner of Westeros becomes independent, the North becomes independent, the Stormlands, even the North, now ruled by the White Walkers, would be independent as well, and everyone would be on equal ground. And it's also
much like Brexit.
Let's not bring politics into this, thank you. but yeah, that would it makes sense on that regard for how you'd expect Thrones to be unexpected in ending in a way like Thrones does good with politics, but it's also bittersweet, but makes sense for Jon because he's always been the one to put others before himself. He's not selfish. He wants to do what he can for the greater good. He only cares about fighting the dead. So if he found out that the only way to beat them was to sacrifice himself, he would do it. And it would also be bittersweet again because at this point, if him and Dany do remain lovers and we find out she's pregnant, how bittersweet is that to finally meet the man that you've fallen in love with? You know, love comes at the eyes, and they have that scene in the bedroom in the final episode. But it would be so bittersweet if she finally met someone that she loved. She has a child with him, and to also find out that, oh, he's also your blood. You're not alone in the world. You're not the last Targaryen. To finally see him die, or better yet, basically die a living hell, becoming this new monster and ruling them. I can't imagine it being any bittersweet than that. And also, I think that this kind of ties into the idea that if Jon does just die fighting the Night King, and he just kills the Night King, but he dies with his wounds, I just feel like that's kind of like playing a card too late, because they killed him off already in Season 5. So to have him die again, just to, like, die, it would just be too, oh, you already killed him, so why should we care? So I think that if he was to die, but not die, he'd just become a living dead corpse, like become the new Night King, that makes more sense for his ending to have a bittersweet tone to it, but also do what he does best. Because he is a natural born ruler. Even if he doesn't like doing it, he does what he does for the good of the realm. So he's doing his part for the realm, and also for the people he loves. Again, there's more elements to it, I guess, but again, sorry, we've been talking for 2 hours now, and I do want to rest my voice. So that's the crux of that theory. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, it is very much like the sort of. It's similar to the one I said about Dany being the ice queen. It's just the other way around, I guess, but with Jon. But it's like what you said. It's a good way of sort of subverting expectation of the rather than there being the final big battle. There's some long drawn out politics, which like Game of Thrones does well. So yeah, I think that'll be. I'm not sure if they will. I don't think they'll do that because I think now that they're not doing the books anymore, they will do more of the thing that we are expecting and the sort of the more cliched tropes. I think they are actually going to do that. Like, I mean, I know we don't want that, but I think that is what they will do. But if they do that, the Jon become the Night King, that would be different, I think, and it'd be brave for them to do that. But I honestly don't think they will.
Yeah, you never know. But then again, you never know. Yeah,
exactly.
So we do have one more segment, but again, we've pretty much just tied to. We'll just get the segment out of the way because it's a very quick one. So, do you have any personal hopes for the final season that you want to happen? And this is not fan theories or rumours. It's just more like, what do you want out of the final season for Thrones?
Well, I just want them to because there's definitely going to be two massive. There's going to be loads of battles in this series, but there's going to be two big ones. There's going to be the one for the Dawn and the one for the Throne, and they need to figure out which one to put first because they can't have them both at the same time. They have to have them one after the other. But to have the big battle that they've been waiting for the entire, like the battle for the Dawn, they've been waiting. We've been waiting for that since series 1, and that's the sort of main battle of the entire series. To end it on that would be a sort of a good way of ending it, but then it doesn't really matter because we've already had the battle for the throne before that, so whatever happens it won't affect it. And then again, to have that battle first, and then to have the battle for the throne after, it's sort of like a bit of an anticlimax but that's the last battle is the one that will mean the most, because that's the one who rules. So they need to find a good balance of how to finish it and how to put the battles in and how to conclude it. So that's the only thing I'm hoping for, is them to get that right and to find a good balance of emotion and spectacle. So yeah, that's really the only thing that I'm hoping for in this series.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I think overall I just want them to surprise me, because I think that I need to stop saying that, but I've always had a passion for shows that make me move my emotions, that make me feel for them, and make me just feel wowed. And Thrones is a great series in all its execution, from the moment you saw Ned Stark die to the Red Wedding, even to the small stuff like Ygritte being killed and Jon being killed and Dany finally getting to Westeros after so many seasons. I really just hope that they don't, as you say, fall into the trap of falling into cliches, giving us basic and expected tropes just so they can get to the ending and finish the show because they want to do other things. I think I really would. Again, why I'm clavering for theories like Jon will become the Night King, or Arya will be the one to kill Cersei. Again, people have their preferences for how theories can go, but I would love some of those to come true, just because it would just be so unpredictable. Even though I am saying I predict them, even though it does kind of contradict my unpredictableness to it, it would still be unpredictable, because it's a theory that it's just a theory. It's not something that's guaranteed to happen. It's something that could happen. So if it was to happen, I'd be thrilled. But yeah, I just hope they continue. I hope they kind of bring back that shock value that's over the moon for me and everyone. Because again, season 7 wasn't bad, but it was cliche in some regards, and it was expected, and you kind of saw things coming from the mile off, and it was disappointing in some character interactions and how they didn't pan out as you'd thought they would go, or you didn't see enough of them. So I just hope that we get to see more character interactions, we get to see more, as you said, conversations about politics and stuff that keeps us together in the world with Thrones and makes us see it's not just fighting bad guys, it's not fighting the dead, it's just heroes trying to figure out why they're doing this, what they're doing it for, and figuring out something how to do about it.
And what to do after.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But other than that, really, I just think that I just hope each character has an ending that feels justified, because we know that it's going to be a bittersweet. We've reinforced that so many times. But yeah, I just think that I really hope that each character has an ending that makes sense from the journey they've come on, and I hope that it feels natural for that character, because the characters that we've seen suffer, like Sansa and Arya, and even Jon, again, their fates could go either way, but I just hope that whichever way they do go, it feels like it's earned, justified, and doesn't feel like, oh, they're doing this just because they're iconic characters in culture, and we need to cater to the audience because we don't want to upset them and make them revolt when they have to do the spin-off. Because I can guarantee you, if they go any of those ways, the moment the books are out, they're immediately going to be compared to them, and as time goes on, people will say, yeah, the TV series was good, but they clearly got over their heads, they clearly just felt like they could do with anything they want with the show, and it didn't really live up to what we would have hoped. So, yeah, and who knows, maybe down the line, if they ever get to doing another adaptation of A Song of Ice and Fire, and they do it more faithfully because they've got the books to rely on, you never know, it could be a lot more better. So I hope this show ends on a way that feels in the spirit of Martin's final works, and it just makes sense from where we began in this series.
And it respects the fans.
Exactly, yeah. Don't pull a Star Wars. Just do what makes sense for the story, but you can be a little fan servicey here and there, and maybe pull in some other elements, as long as you don't try and change it to the point of your own intent. But yeah, so yeah, that's all I had to add on the topic of Thrones today. Thank you for joining for me this, Harry.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Oh, I do have one final point I like to hope for in this. I hope we see Hot Pie on the Iron Throne. hot pie should win the Iron Throne. He should be the ruler of everything and making pies for all the people.
And,
So that's my final word.
yeah, he's a baker, isn't he, in real life?
I think. Well, he I don't think he's a baker in real life, but he has made. He did a thing where you can buy a Stark loaf of bread, and he did that. He did that for a little bit, which I think is quite funny.
Good for him. Yeah, it would be nice to see him again.
I like hot pie.
Yeah, but yeah. So that's all on our topic for Game of Thrones today. We've finally finished up this podcast, so yeah, we'll be able to work on some other stuff. We'll be working on another Lecter talk soon, so you can keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, thank you for joining us. I am Kobi.
And I am Harry.
And this is Great Owl Entertainment. Thank you for joining us for the Great Owl podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
The actress who played her was such a great... She put off such a great performance in The Reigns of Castamere. You would expected they would have wanted to keep her on and milk her till her heart's content. Scratch that. you would have expected... Damn it.
What did you do?
Knocked over my microphone.
Nice.